This is Electric Universe Geology Earth News. I noticed this area right here, right just west, northwest, a little bit of Four Corners right here, about 4 years ago. And I saw a circularity right here, and there seemed to be mountains surrounding it. And then I noticed at times there was an awful lot of basalt, not on the outside edge where the mountains are, but just inside of the mountains. Let me zoom out and go to terrain and we can look at the mountainous area. Mountains seem to go from here around this way. Sangre de Cristo's here, around Santa Fe, down by Tucson, and around. And it doesn't seem to be a coincidence. It seems like something happened here that was a vortex within a much larger vortex. So now we're going to go over and look at Snow Canyon real quick in Zion. This is Snow Canyon here. We discussed it earlier in an earlier video. I believe this was electrically removed. And what's interesting is when you get up into these areas, there's basalt covering the sides of the formations as if it was spackled. And then the valleys seem to have basalt flows much different than the tops of the mesas or the sides of the formation, as if basalt flowed down the valley. But the area above it seems to have been coated with molten iron-rich material. I have some photographs that show this area. Let me go to those now. These are the sides of the valleys in Snow Canyon. The material seems to be basalt, but I don't really have any samples or proof that it is basalt, but I believe it is, and it looks like it's spackled the sides of the sandstone. I believe it's Navajo sandstone. A little bit further north from the spackled material, we have mesas that don't seem to be the result of a flow. They're at the high point, not in the valley. The valleys actually have basalt flows, either from a vent, from an actual volcanic event, probably caused by this electrical event, or possibly basalt that was so hot that it ran downhill. It's hard to know. It's hard to distinguish between those options. But this does not seem to be a flow. It seems to be molten material, iron rich, from above. And then it broke apart and covered the sides of the sandstone here. Here we have Zion Canyon. This is east of Snow Canyon. Here's Kolob Zion. North of Zion, you also have very thick basalt formations east of Cedar City. I believe that the material that was removed from these canyons is what created the basalt on the very top layer. This area, I believe, was flat at one time with mud covering everything all the way down to the bottom of these canyons. These electrical events seem to remove mud, water sediments much easier than they remove welded tough material. It can remove welded tough material like Navajo sandstone, but it's more difficult. The mud and sediments seem to be easily removed by these events. There is no mud sediment at the bottom of these canyons, but there is mud at the very tippy top of the formations in between the valleys. The only way the mud could get there is if it was completely covered with mud from one side to the other. And then afterwards, at the end of the process, something electrical seems to have swept clockwise around the Four Corners event, removed this material and deposited basalt to the north. Now that we have a marker for what these canyons look like and the color that it creates by removing material, creating something similar to pottery where vegetation doesn't grow, this area becomes really interesting. The Grand Mesas over here, you have two layers of basalt underneath of the book cliffs. It appears to me that this area, which is the drainage from the Colorado River and the Green River, was full of mud and sediment. And this event swept clockwise, removing it the same way it removed the material at Zion. Monument Valleys down here. It's like this was all ripped out, and it seems to be swinging clockwise. So here you have the Grand Mesa, the largest mesa in the world, covered with basalt. And if you go there and ask the people at the visitor center, they'll tell you that the basalt here came from Gunnison National Forest, where there are welded tough mountains. And through vents that are no longer visible, it flowed across this very deep valley over to the Grand Mesa. And even the people at the visitor center didn't believe the paper that they would show tourists, written by geologists. They thought it was crazy, and they were actually more persuaded by my explanation. It was kind of funny. So it appears that the material that was removed here is flowing clockwise, creating the Grand Mesa where it's the hottest. This doesn't even have the ability to make welded tough formations. It makes flat formations, as if the basalt is so hot it can't make a mountain, as it were. It just makes flat, really hot basalt. But down here there are mountains of welded tough. And if you continue around, all of this area down here is welded tough mountains on the tops. There's some quartzite that also looks like it was windblown, coming clockwise around four corners. And then it continues. If you go down by Taos in New Mexico, this is all covered with basalt. And you get to Los Alamos, and it's covered with basalt and welded tough. And it's supposed to be a volcano. But it doesn't appear to be a volcano. It appears to be a vortex on the edge of this process. So this is right on the edge. This was probably underwater here. You come over here to Mount Taylor. It looks similar to Via Caldera where Los Alamos is, but I think this was full of water down here, so you didn't have the ability to have a circular vortex caldera. Wherever it was dry, you had accumulation. There's a lot of uranium around here. This seems to all be part of a clockwise event. This is Shiprock. It's a very sacred area for the Navajo. It appears that leeward is to the south. Windward appears to have been to the north. The wind seems to have been blowing this way, just east of the center of the vortex. This is on the east side of the central circle of the Four Corners event. So from what I can tell, this is just welded tough. It's not the throat of a volcano that's been eroded over millions of years. This is a process that all happened at the same time as the rest of this vortex that's spinning clockwise. I have a photograph I can show you of this now. This is the south-facing side of Shiprock. To me, this is leeward. This is the cliff that was created because the wind was coming towards us. It's all part of a clockwise event. Nice horses in the foreground. So in conclusion, apparently, this light-colored material was electrically excavated, similar to Zion and Snow Canyon. It threw molten dust up in a clockwise manner, creating the Grand Mesa, creating all of these welded tough mountains, creating Los Alamos and Mount Taylor and Grants. It swings around. There's more basalt down here, a lot of it. It made a circle within this circle of molten iron-rich dust, which is misconstrued as being volcanic by geologists who only have one pony in the race. They only have volcanoes that can make molten dust, where in the electric universe, I think there's more options. Thank you.